This is the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT Radio.
All right, folks, welcome back. Welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Thank you, Dustin Stockton, before the break. Really important conversation, and we really value Dustin's input on what is a very important story and has huge ramifications for political life, really for democracy in America. That is no understatement. And I think that came across in that segment. Thank you very much to Dustin Stockton there. Follow him on Twitter and on social media. Be sure to follow him. And I think support the work that he's doing because it's excellent. We're going to shift gears right now. As we said, breaking news, the United States and the UK, while the world was fixated on the Trump verdict in New York, the United States and Britain bombed Yemen. And a lot of people aren't aware of this story because it's been completely buried. You have to go and look for it, and you'll find something. You'll be hard pressed to find any serious coverage of this in the West. What we're going to do is get some facts and find out what's happening on the ground in Yemen. Let's bring on to the stage right now award-winning journalist Yousef Mawry, live from Yemen, is joining us on the live link right now. He's been assessing the situation from close range. Let's find out more about what's happening. First of all, Yousef, thank you for coming on at such late notice. I know it's a difficult time right now in your country, but if you could just give us a breakdown on what just happened over the last 48 hours. Go ahead.
Well, basically, you have 16 Yemeni civilians that have been killed in the latest U.S. and UK airstrikes. 43 of those injured, or 43 others have been injured. This was an attack that took place in 3 Yemeni provinces, in the capital Sana'a, in the central province of Taiz, and most of the attacks that took place in the port city of Hodeidah, where the 16 civilians were killed. In addition to that, earlier today, we had breaking news that Yemen's Ansar Allah movement, they launched a series of ballistic and drones at the U.S. aircraft carrier, the Eisenhower. And according to the military spokesperson for Yemen's Ansar Allah, those were, the launch was successful in hitting its target.
So you're saying that in response to this bombing raid by the U.S. and UK, that Ansar Allah, this is known as called the Houthies in Western media, they've responded by hitting one of the flagship aircraft carriers of the U.S. military. Do we have any idea what damage might have been incurred on the U.S. If they have indeed landed a strike on this aircraft carrier? Go ahead, Yousef.
Well, the aircraft carrier is carrying the F-35 fighter jets and F-16s, and if the attack was indeed a successful hit, the most damning damage to the U.S. would be the ignition of fire from hitting one of these F-35s that are obviously on the top deck of the Eisenhower, because that's how the U.S. is launching attacks with the fighter jets. It lurks the Red Sea, and these fighter jets are launching from the Eisenhower to carry out attacks, illegal attacks, terror attacks on the Yemeni people. I think I mentioned in the very first interview on your show that, and we were talking about how the U.S. and British airstrikes, they're basically not hitting anything except sand and rocks, because all the military facilities, all of the weapon depots have been evacuated, have been moved into unknown locations, perhaps underground bunkers. I mentioned that eventually, because the U.S.'s military airstrikes have been frivolous, they haven't achieved anything, eventually they were going to start targeting innocent civilians. And here we are, after the U.S. and British airstrikes have been unsuccessful in achieving their goals, and their goals when they first announced this joint military operation was to dismantle Ansar Allah Houthis military capabilities in the Red Sea, from preventing them from launching drones, launching ballistic missiles against U.S., British, and Israeli linked ships, and they haven't been able to do that. And in fact, the only thing they've been able to do is just propel Ansar Allah Houthis to expand their military operations and escalate their military activities to reach new territory, uncharted territory. We're talking about the Mediterranean Sea. We're talking about the Indian Ocean. We're talking about companies, any company that's that is shipping to Israel or has shipped to occupied Palestine over the past month. Those companies are going to be on the target list, and even if they are shipping on, even if they're shipping to other states other than Israel, if you once you enter the blacklist of Ansar Allah Houthis, then it's basically fair game. Any shipment from this company will be targeted wherever the ballistic missiles of Ansar Allah can reach.
So let's be clear on what's happening here. And obviously the U.S. have their own narrative. Britain is just there to make it look like a coalition. Let's be honest about that. So they're acting outside of NATO. They're acting outside, really, of international law. And here's the statement. We'll put it up on screen from the British government. And this is what they're saying. They're claiming that the Royal Air Force has participated in an operation targeting Houthi military facilities. So they're claiming we've only hit military facilities here. There's a joint operation, and this is basically to degrade their ability to persist with their attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, which has thus far killed innocent merchant mariners from Vietnam and the Philippines and damaged several merchant ships and sunk the bulk carrier Rubimar. So intelligence, according to the British, has confirmed that 2 locations near Hodeidah as being involved in the Houthi anti-shipping attack, with a number of buildings identified housing drone and ground control facilities, providing storage for very long-range drones, as well as surface-to-air weapons used to impede coalition operations to safeguard shipping in the region. Let's stop there for a moment, Yousef. How much of what I just read from the British government's MOD official statement, in your opinion, is true?
Well, it's as true as the weapons of mass destruction rhetoric that they wanted to sell so they can invade Iraq. And look what happened. What is true is that in the one attack that Ansar Allah Houthis carried out on a British or an American linked ship, where I think 2 of the crew members were killed, and I think 2 of them, they were not American or they were not British. However, they worked for the company that was shipping. Now, here's the thing. Who's really responsible for the deaths of the crew members on these ships? When Ansar Allah Houthis, they give out a clear warning to all companies and all nations, do not ship to the Red Sea. You will be targeted. Your crew members' lives will be at risk. Do not put their life at risk and travel through this route. However, and obviously, before these attacks carry out, before these military operations are conducted, they give out warnings, 3 warnings to the crew members, to the captain, to revert, go back to where you came from or seek an alternative route, because you will be attacked if you continue to approach. However, they ignore these warnings. They don't take heed of these warnings, and there's consequences when your country is at war. When the country, the nation of Yemen, declares that no ships and no companies will be accepted to cross Bab el-Mandeb if they ship to occupied Palestine, enabling the genocide to continue longer. So, the U.S. and the British government, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because I kind of wanted to mention this as well, and that is it's the U.S. airstrikes, and really the UK government is just tagging its name next to the U.S. just so it could be viewed as a coalition attack, as opposed to just the U.S. always being blamed for killing thousands and thousands of innocent people. But whatever, if the UK wants to sponsor the US's attacks on Yemen, then according to Ansar Allah, they're also going to be targeted. And this is why these military operations are focused on US, British, and Israeli-linked ships. However, I can tell you, because of the 16 Yemenis that have been killed, Yemen's Ansar Allah Houthis are officially declaring war on all US and British interests in the region. I can tell you that all of these military activities are happening in round number four of military escalations, as was announced by the leader of Yemen's Ansar Allah Houthis. I can tell you that round number 5 and round number 6, we're going to witness Ansar Allah Houthis targeting ships in the Suez Canal, targeting ships attempting to cross the Strait of Gibraltar. We're going to see Ansar Allah Houthi drones target US British military presence anywhere in the region, military bases in the island of Socotra, military bases in Saudi Arabia, throughout the Gulf, in Jordan, in the UAE. Because as we have seen, everything that Ansar Allah said they were going to do, they fulfilled their end of the bargain. They fulfilled their promise. And when they say the world is in surprise for more military escalations, and in fact, Ansar Allah Houthis are saying that they have surprises coming up ahead, and these surprises are not only going to surprise their enemies, they're also going to surprise the allies, because Yemen has weapons that they have not yet introduced, they have not yet talked about, and the only time you will hear or witness these weapons is when they are revealed on the battlefield, or in this case, on the battle ocean or battle sea.
And let's also be clear here, Yemen, if you want to go by the letter of international law, this case is in the International Courts of Justice right now. Israel's in violation of the Genocide Convention. It's in the ICC, crimes against humanity and war crimes. The Prime Minister himself from Israel is in the dock, potentially in the ICC. Yemen is acting to defend the people of Palestine. It's a very clear case of a military intervention or a humanitarian or responsibility to protect, whatever you want to call it, enforcing sanctions to prevent a military from using those arms or any material support against unarmed civilians, which Israel is guilty of doing. I think there's no debate. Yousef, I wanted to ask you, in terms of, there's obviously, they're claiming that they hit military facilities. You're saying they haven't. There civilian casualties, deaths on the Yemeni side, and is there going to be any international recourse for this, the killing of civilians, or has this just become business as usual whenever the U.S. or their partners are involved? Go ahead.
It's business as usual whenever the U.S. is involved. And it's been like that for many, many decades. Once the U.S. assumed a superpower after World War II, they basically control who gets held accountable, who gets prosecuted in the International Criminal Court. They get to decide who's the terrorist, who's the freedom fighter, who the good guy is, who the bad guy is. However, I think people are waking up to this. And even if people are not waking up to this, it's still not going to stop the Yemeni people from committing to their humanitarian obligation and abiding by international law, abiding by the articles in the Geneva Convention, articles in the Doctrine to Protect, which was actually established in 2005 by the US and then adopted by the UN. The Doctrine to Protect, Article 1, 2, and 3, they stipulate that it becomes the obligation of all countries to protect any group of people if they are being massacred, if genocide is being committed on them. And it becomes the obligation of the international community. Well, first of all, it becomes the obligation of neighboring countries, according to the doctrine to protect. the obligation first and foremost of neighboring countries, which is, in this case, it's Egypt and Jordan. However, they obviously are allies with the US, and they are proxies, according to the majority of the Arab world. They're proxies of the Israeli regime. So now it becomes the obligation on the international community to step in. And the only groups, only nations that are mobilizing militarily is Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, and you have factions in Syria and factions in Iraq. However, I think what distinguishes Yemen from other actors in trying to bring an end to the genocide is the fact that Yemen is the only country to declare war on Israel, and the fact that Yemen's Ansar Allah movement have seized an Israeli-linked ship, have drowned a British ship, and now they've even hit the famous or infamous U.S. aircraft carrier, the Eisenhower. I can tell you the U.S. is not going to admit, they're not going to admit that the Eisenhower was damaged or that a ballistic or drone missile successfully hit its target from Yemen. They're just not going to do that because they need to maintain their hegemonic identity in the Middle East. The Ansar Allah movement is an inconvenience because they are not afraid. They're not scared to cross those lines that the U.S. has drew all across the Middle East. And I think in the future, the U.S., the British, and the Western world, they're in for a rude awakening because of this downward trajectory that they are heading in by spilling blood wherever they go, spilling blood wherever they get involved.
Yeah, and we got some footage here
to show the entire world, actually. That
I mean, Yousef, we have some footage here of the aftermath of the U.S. and U.K. Bombing raid on Yemen, and these are clearly, as you can see, civilians dressed in civilian clothes, in some cases young enough to be children. These are the victims of this latest airstrike by the U.S. and the U.K. And I can't underline the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that Yemen, because of sanctions, even the total siege on the port of Hodeidah for the better part of 8 years by the United States and Saudi Arabia and the UAE declaring war on Yemen. It's one of the poorest countries on paper in the world, and they're attacking it and they're killing civilians. But this shouldn't shock us at this point after what we have witnessed for the last 7 months in Gaza. This is basically what you're dealing with. I mean, unbelievable scenes, Yousef, coming out of the various cities in Yemen. And I'm sure, you're as horrified as anybody to see this unfolding, but yet, unfortunately, you're probably not surprised. So my question is this, Yousef, how are the other axis of resistance actors? We're talking about the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamic resistance in Iraq, Hamas, Syria, Hezbollah. How are they going to view your country withstanding this type of an aggression, and also the fact that you're hitting the Yemen is hitting back against the United States? Do you think this is going to change perhaps the orientation of some of the axis of resistance countries? Will they be encouraged or perhaps motivated to take a stronger position after seeing this happen in Yemen? Go ahead, Yousef.
I can tell you that the position of the majority of Yemenis, the position of Ansar Allah, is that it's no longer time to be a resistance movement that's basing its entire operations on reactionary efforts. Yemen is taking the stance that no longer will we be on the defensive. No longer will we just react to the U.S. international hegemonic architecture that continues to exploit the lands of the Middle East and continues to spill the blood wherever they go. So I think the message that Ansar Allah and Yemen is sending to the other members of the Axis of Resistance is that we can no longer continue this reactionary method. In the short term, we have to the Axis of Resistance has to transform from being just reacting to the attacks from the U.S. and Israel and the West, and then switching strategy to advancing to being on the offensive. Because what's very clear is that if your whole strategy is based on defending, you're just defending your land, you're trying to minimize the damage as much as possible, which I think Iran, Lebanon's Hezbollah, and other groups and factions in the Middle East are, is their current strategy. Yemen is saying that this is no longer going to be the strategy, and that the axis of resistance now have to be proactive. So instead of waiting on the U.S. to attack or waiting on Israel to expand its empire, Yemen, regardless of what the other members of the axis of resistance have in plan, Yemen is basically saying, listen, just open the borders for us, open the borders for Yemenis, and according to the Ansar Allah leader, he guarantees that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Yemeni troops will begin the march to liberate the land of Al-Aqsa. And this is he challenges he challenges Saudi Arabia and other Arab states to call him out on his bluff. Open the borders, and Yemen will send the army, or at the very least, do not prevent or intercept the ballistic missiles that are being launched towards occupied Palestine. With the events that happened in Iran, obviously we've seen Iran commit to that major attack on occupied Palestine. I think it was a month and a half ago, and then obviously you have the tragic death of the Iranian president and the Iranian foreign minister. I can only imagine what the Iranian people are going through. It's definitely very hard times, but at the end of the day, there comes a time where the strategy of defensive, your defensive strategy can only take you so far. Eventually, if you know the enemy's bearing down on you, if you know that if you have an enemy that's hell bent on destroying you, if you have an enemy that's hell bent on attacking and killing your people, the defensive strategy will only get you so far. And I think this is what the Ansar Allah movement has realized. And when the leader of Ansar Allah says the surprises ahead, the military surprises, they're not only going to surprise the enemies, but they're also going to surprise the axis of resistance allies. I think because he's taken the initiative with this movement, they're taking the initiative to go on the offensive and attack these ships out in the Mediterranean Sea, attack these ships, not just to say that they launched a missile or just they launched an attack, but to actually deliver damage and to stop the U.S. and British empires dead in their track when it comes to meddling in the internal affairs of Yemen. So I think we're going to see more of this offensive strategy by Yemen's Ansar Allah movement in the months to come, and we don't know where it's going to end.
Well, based on what you just described there, Yousef, I can tell you that's probably going to slam the door shut of any hopes or dreams of normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. That certainly takes a different turn for the whole game in the region because Yemen is now, as you say, they're stepping out and taking a more proactive role. So I think a lot of other people in the neighborhood are going to have to basically conform to the new reality. And if that's indeed the case, it certainly looks like it is unfolding. It can be very interesting in the coming weeks and months. Go ahead.
It's the point of no return. As far as Yemen is concerned, this is the point of no return because of the genocide that is happening in Palestine, where you have more than 45 innocent Palestinians being massacred, have been massacred, and are being massacred on a daily basis. It has become very clear to the Yemeni people that the current international structure cannot remain as it is, because what is happening in Palestine can easily be happening in Syria. It can easily be happening in Lebanon. It could easily be happening in Yemen or any other country for that matter. And I think it becomes the responsibility of the international community to see that there is a brutal genocidal regime that is committing this massacre, and the fact that nobody's willing to do anything about it, that's an extreme measure. You know, the genocide is extreme, but not doing anything about this genocidal extreme is an extreme of itself. And whenever that's the situation, only extreme measures can be adopted in order to bring an end to that threat. And I think Yemen wants to be and is willing to be the to be the leading example and the leader to bring forward peace in the Middle East by first and foremost bringing an end to the genocide, and then undercutting U.S., Israeli, and Western military options in the entirety of the Middle East.
Award-winning journalist from Yemen on the ground right now, giving us his latest report after the U.S.-UK bombing raids. Yousef Mawry joining us. Thank you, Yousef, for coming on TNT this week.
Good to be here. Take care.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Great report. Great to hear something fresh and up to date from on the ground there. Yousef Mawry, follow him on X, Twitter. That's where I'm getting my updates right now on this breaking situation from his account. So I encourage people to do the same. We'll try to drop those details in the TNT chat community. In the meantime, let's take a break right now. I'm Patrick Henningsen. Stay right there.